Welcome, curious minds, to the Uncanny Valley podcast. This is where we plunge into the depths of your chosen sources, pulling out the really potent insights and hopefully shedding some clear light on complex ideas, maybe with a bit of wit along the way.
Definitely. And today we're really embarking on quite an extraordinary literary journey. We're diving into the, let's say, intricate currents of James Joyce's huge work, Ulysses.
Yeah, it's monumental, isn't it? And it's not really just a book in the conventional sense. It's more like this meticulously crafted tapestry of a single day. June 16th, 1904. It unfolds across Dublin, often in very mundane settings, but it's all seen through this incredibly heightened, sometimes frankly unsettling lens of human consciousness.
Exactly right. The source material we have, it's genuinely unique. It's this stream of consciousness narrative, a really deep exploration into the actual minds of the two main characters, Stephen Dedalus and Leopold Bloom.
Oh,
And they're just experiencing this one ordinary day, which turns out to be, well, profoundly significant.
it can feel sprawling, I think that's fair to say. Maybe even a bit daunting when you first pick it up.
Oh, absolutely. But it's one of those texts that just rewards every bit of attention you give it. You find these unexpected revelations about, well, what it even means to be human.
And that's exactly where we come in today. Our mission, if you like, is to be your guides through this, to help you unpick these dense but really rewarding moments from the text.
We'll introduce you to the key figures, the memorable people walking around this iconic Dublin. We'll try to highlight the main themes that weave through their day.
And hopefully we can reveal some of the surprising humanity, the humor, and yeah, even those occasional sort of uncanny distortions that Joyce masterfully embedded within his very intricate prose.
We really want to make this rich text, which can sometimes feel challenging, feel more approachable, more engaging.
Yeah, pull out those surprising details, connect ideas that might seem disparate at first glance, and really bring this single day in Dublin to life for you.
Exactly. So let's settle in and get ready to explore the consciousnesses that really shape this unforgettable day.
1. A Dublin morning. Rituals, ruminations, and relationships.
Okay, so our journey begins early morning. We're perched atop the Martello Tower. It's this old defensive fort overlooking Dublin Bay. And honestly, it's one of the most memorable entrances in all of literature. It just throws you right in.
It really does. You're immediately plunged into this world that feels, well, both familiar and somehow subtly off-kilter.
Our first character, Buck Mulligan, he just bursts onto the scene.
Yeah, bursts is the word. And he's introduced doing this ritual that's simultaneously absurdly mundane and kind of pseudo-sacred. He's shaving.
Right. Holding this shaving bowl aloft, mirror and razor crossed on the lather, and he's wearing this yellow dressing gown.
Ungirdled, yeah. The description says it's sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. It's quite a picture, almost theatrical, like he's putting on a performance, demanding your attention.
And he immediately sets that tone with the opening line, doesn't he? In troibo ad altare Dei. Latin. I will go in unto the altar of God.
Exactly. Sacred liturgical language, what a priest would say entering the altar. But he's saying it while, shaving. A completely ordinary, almost intimate act.
And then, without even pausing, he calls down to Stephen Dedalus, come up, Kinch. Come up, you fearful Jesuit.
And that right there, that juxtaposition, it's foundational to Joyce's method in Ulysses, isn't it?
Absolutely. Having Mulligan use sacred Latin for such a mundane, almost silly, axe-shaving read, Joyce is immediately signaling his intention. He's sort of democratizing the epic.
Elevating the everyday, showing us that even the most ordinary moments can contain these echoes of the profound.
And conversely, that the sacred can pop up in the most irreverent places.
It's brilliant, and Mulligan's irreverent humor is just crystal clear from the start.
Oh, yeah. He keeps addressing Stephen with these, well, coarse, witty remarks. Later, he calls him the jejune Jesuit.
Jejune, meaning what? Immature, lacking substance.
Yeah, basically. It suggests Mulligan sees Stephen as maybe emotionally underdeveloped, stuck in a sort of intellectual adolescence, despite his obvious intelligence.
So it's not just friendly banter, it's establishing this really complex, maybe even contentious friendship right from page 1.
Definitely. And you get a real sense of Mulligan's personality. Expansive, almost boundless self-regard.
He describes his own name, Malachi Mulligan, as having a Hellenic ring, hasn't it? Tripping and sunny like the Buck himself. He says this laughing with delight.
Totally self-assured, just enjoying his own performance.
He mentions coming from Oxford, too, suggests going to Athens. It shows off his intellectual side, but it feels kind of flippant, doesn't it? Hints at his own pretensions, maybe.
It does. And then he observes that Stephen has the real Oxford manner, but immediately points out that this other character, Haynes, an English visitor, can't make you out.
Ah, okay. So setting up a little conflict there. National identity, intellectual identity.
Exactly. A subtle tension right away.
And Stephen Dedalus, in complete contrast to Mulligan's loudness and self-promotion, he's much quieter, right? Brooding.
Much quieter. His responses, initially anyway, are quite clipped, reserved. Like when he asks, how long is Haynes going to stay in this tower?
It says a lot about his internal state, doesn't it?
Right.
Maybe he's just weary of Mulligan's constant provoking.
Or just, his mind is too busy with its own complicated thoughts.
Yeah.
Lost in the labyrinth.
And that nickname Mulligan uses, kinch, the knife blade. That's pretty telling.
Very telling. It immediately implies sharpness, precision, a critical, maybe even cutting intellect.
Even when he's quiet, yeah. A mind that dissects, analyzes, which could be a strength, but also maybe isolates him.
That's a really insightful way to put it. Captures Stephen's incisive nature perfectly. And that incisiveness, or maybe the tension around it, gets amplified pretty quickly.
Because Stephen then mentions Haynes, their English guest.
Yeah, he says Haynes was raving all night about a Black Panther.
Okay, wow. That injects a bit of mystery straight away. Psychological unease, maybe, makes Haynes seem a bit disturbed.
Definitely. It adds this layer of subtle psychological, uncanniness to what's otherwise just a normal morning. It hints at hidden anxieties, a disrupted mental state, and those echoes will kind of reverberate through the day.
But the real conflict, the tension between Stephen and Mulligan, it boils up fast. Mulligan gets quite pointed, almost aggressive.
He does. Why don't you trust me more? What have you up your nose against me? Is it Haynes? He even hints at past events.
Right, moments mentions Clive Kempthorpe's rooms, young shouts of moneyed voices. Suggests some history there, maybe betrayal or misunderstanding, a shared past haunting their friendship.
Exactly. And this is where you start to see the deep emotional vulnerability under Stephen's sort of cool exterior. Mulligan isn't just a friend. He's like a constant irritant, reminding Stephen of perceived failures, past humiliations.
And it all culminates in that really painful moment. Mulligan basically scolds him, quite cruelly actually, for not praying for his dying mother.
Yeah, he blames it on a cursed Jesuit strain.
Yeah.
Injected the wrong way. Calls Stephen's actions mockery and beastly.
Oof. That cuts right to the core of Stephen, doesn't it? Touches that deep wound about his mother's death.
It's central to his suffering. His mother's death, his feeling that he failed her, didn't offer that final act of, filial piety. It's this constant gnawing guilt and grief for him.
And you feel that pain so acutely. Stephen's internal world just shifts dramatically after Mulligan says that.
He doesn't respond outwardly, does he? He retreats inward.
Completely. His thoughts fragment. Bits of Fergus's song, memories of her secrets, old feather fans, tasseled dance cards.
And that powerful image, the bowl of bitter waters. Such a strong metaphor for his grief, his internal state.
It's a raw demonstration of stream of consciousness, isn't it? External words triggering this torrent of deeply personal, painful associations. Especially connected to his mother's dying words to him, love's bitter mystery.
That inner turmoil, that private haunting grief, it's the emotional anchor for Stephen throughout the whole day.
And the setting itself, the Martello Tower, it's significant too.
Highly significant. It's a circular defensive structure, kind of an isolated fortress, which mirrors Stephen's own intellectual and emotional isolation in a way.
And Mulligan's movements, blessing the tower, the land, the mountains.
Yeah.
It keeps blending the mundane with that pseudo-religious ritual stuff.
Reinforcing that whole stylistic thing, finding the epic in the everyday.
Yeah.
And that last detail.
With shaving bowl.
Yeah. The nickel shaving bowl, shown, forgotten on the parapet. It's this tangible link back to the morning's activities, but it also hints at maybe forgetfulness, a fleeting moment of peace, perhaps.
A fragile normalcy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Before the deeper, more painful thoughts resurface and just engulf Stephen again, leaving him adrift in his sorrow.
It's a really beautiful, quiet image right in the middle of all that emotional brewing inside Stephen.
And from these complexities, confined within the tower, the narrative lens just gracefully shifts, widens out.
Right. Takes us to another consciousness waking up across Dublin. We move from the tower's intellectual confines to a quieter domestic scene.
And we meet Leopold Bloom, whose day begins with rituals of a very different but equally revealing kind. To Leopold Bloom. Observations, encounters, and inner life. So, as Stephen is wrestling with his internal demons, the weight of his past, our focus shifts pretty dramatically to Leopold Bloom. And his day starts in a really distinctively domestic, sensory-rich way. He's making breakfast for Molly, his wife. She's still in bed.
And Joyce brings this alive with just incredible sensory detail, doesn't he? You're completely immersed in this mundane but intimate morning ritual.
Absolutely. You see him carefully preparing her thin bread and butter,
You see the lump of butter slide and melt on the kidney he's cooking for himself.
which then sizzles amid the sizzling butter sauce. You can almost hear it, smell it.
Yeah, the soft sizzle, the rich aroma. It's a very intimate, grounded start to his day. It immediately establishes Bloom as this man of quiet domesticity, thoughtful consideration.
That focus on the everyday, the physical sensations of life, it's pure Joyce realism. This grounding in the quotidian, it defines Bloom right away.
And then there's that small, everyday detail that follows. Bloom realizes he doesn't have his latchkey,
Right. And he thinks, no use disturbing her.
which suggests, okay, he's considerate. Maybe a gentle deference to Molly's rest.
Definitely. But maybe it also hints at just routine? Or perhaps even a subtle distance between them in the morning. It's a quiet little inconvenience, setting a tone of minor disruptions that sort of add up through his day.
And then, the first clue of something more private. A little crack in that domestic facade.
Yes. He hears a soft grunt from Molly, and then his eyes land on a strip of torn envelope peeking out from under her pillow,
And a letter lying right there on the bedspread.
which turns out to be from Martha Clifford, his secret correspondent. This woman he's been exchanging these anonymous, slightly suggestive letters with.
His reaction is really telling, isn't it? A mix of things. Anticipation, maybe a bit of guilt, and that playful internal monologue about Martha.
Weak Joy opened his lips. Changed since the first letter. Wondered if she wrote it herself. He's analyzing her style, her persona.
Doing the indignant. A girl of good family like me, respectable character, could meet one Sunday after the rosary, thank you. Not having any. It's like we're plunged right into his internal moral landscape. Desire, discretion, self-awareness, all mixed up.
And he finds that common pin from her clothes.
Hmm.
A tiny, almost fetishistic detail that says so much about the nature of their secret exchange.
These small details, they reveal so much about Bloom's inner life, his complex relationships.
He also has that tender moment thinking about his daughter, Millie.
Right, Silly Millie's birthday gift, the amberade necklace she broke.
And his internal song, "Oh, Millie Bloom, you are my darling, you are my looking glass from night to morning."
Huh.
That really shows his deep paternal affection, a softer, sentimental side.
It contrasts nicely with the ambiguity around Martha's letter, doesn't it? Emphasizes his role as a caring father, a source of quiet strength and love amidst his other worries.
Definitely. So after these intimate domestic moments, we follow both Stephen and Bloom out into the city, making their rounds, and Dublin just comes alive through their very different perspectives.
Stephen has that encounter with the milkwoman. She's sort of a rural figure in the middle of the city, and it immediately brings up his ongoing money troubles, right? Needing to collect overdue payments, a constant pressure.
His financial precariousness is absolutely a constant thread, and then Stephen interacts with Mr. Deasy.
The cantankerous school headmaster.
Who wants Stephen to get his letter about foot and mouth disease published in the papers, specifically the Evening Telegraph.
And Deasy has these really strong, often prejudiced opinions about women.
Very striking.
Ah.
A faithless wife first brought the strangers to our shore here. And a woman, too, brought Parnell low.
Wow. It establishes the pervasive, maybe casual misogyny of the time, doesn't it? Even among educated people. It's a stark contrast to Bloom's more nuanced inner world we see later.
And Deasy's fervent declaration, "For Ulster will fight and Ulster will be right," just grounds the whole thing in contemporary Irish politics, the simmering nationalist tensions, hints at his rigid, kind of backward-looking worldview.
And Stephen's internal reaction to Deasy is priceless. Shows his critical distance, his dry wit, even when things are awkward.
Mulligan will dub me a new name. The Bullock Befriending Bard.
Yeah, it's like this moment of intellectual self-defense, mocking Deasy's obsession with cattle while also knowing Mulligan will just label him again.
Meanwhile, Bloom's journey through Dublin. It's just a masterclass in observation. He's the perfect flaneur.
That term for the keen urban observer, right? Wandering in the city, taking it all in, making sense of modern life through its details.
Exactly. You notice schoolboys, a pork butcher, sausages in Lukács's window. He even pauses to appreciate a woman whacking a carpet on the clothesline, noticing how her crooked skirt swings at each whack.
It's these small sensory moments, these vivid snapshots, that build up this rich, pulsating picture of the city, all filtered through Bloom's quiet, appreciative gaze.
These observations really define Bloom's quiet empathy, his deep connection to the city's rhythm. And then a really significant plot point for Bloom's day gets set up.
When he bumps into C.P. McCoy.
Yeah. McCoy asks about the funeral of Paddy Dignam. This becomes a central event for Bloom, drawing him into that communal ritual of mourning, connecting him to this wider network of Dubliners.
And McCoy also mentions Molly's singing gig, doesn't he, in Belfast?
Right, at the Ulster Hall on the 25th, which immediately reveals Molly's public life, her career as a well-known soprano. It expands our view of her beyond just the bedroom scene, hints at her independent artistic life.
And even something as mundane as a newspaper ad becomes a moment of reflection for Bloom.
The Plumtree's potted meat ad. It's brilliant.
What is home without Plumtree's potted meat? Incomplete. With it, an abode of bliss.
It's this perfect moment where commercial banality triggers Bloom's internal thoughts on domesticity, happiness. Shows how even the most ordinary stuff is loaded with meaning for him.
His professional life also comes into focus as he moves through the city.
Yeah, his interactions at the Evening Telegraph office, trying to get advertising placed for Alexander Keys. It clearly shows his job as an ad canvasser.
Puts him right at the intersection of commerce and public life in Dublin. Shows his practical side, his engagement with the city's economy.
And while he's there, amidst all the noise of the printing presses, the journalists buzzing around, he overhears these intellectual chats.
Discussions about Cicero, Irish land issues.
Professor McKee's pertinent question about whose land from our lovely land, that's particularly striking. It directly hits on ownership, national identity, the legacy of colonialism in Ireland.
A quick glimpse into the intellectual debates swirling around Dublin.
And then there's that touch of everyday humor when he bumps into Lenehan.
Oh yeah, complaining about his knee.
And blaming it on the accumulation of the Anno Domini.
Literally in the year of the Lord, just meaning getting old.
Exactly. It's a brief, light moment that contrasts with the heavier stuff, showing the different textures of Dublin's social life.
These encounters, the profound and the mundane, they beautifully transition us, don't they, from the external world of Dublin streets and newspaper offices
into the deeper, often complex thoughts of the characters, especially about literature and these broader societal issues that are about to explode in a big intellectual showdown. 3. Literary echoes, social commentary, and Dublin's pulse.
So our journey now takes us right into the intellectual heart of Dublin, the National Library. And this is really where Stephen Dedalus shines, or maybe broods is the better word, in the world of literary theory.
Yeah, this is a really pivotal scene for Stephen. Dense, but exhilarating in its own way. His sharp intellect, combined with all that personal anguish, really comes out here.
He gets to this deep discussion about Shakespeare, and he asserts, almost like it's a dogma, that a man of genius makes no mistakes.
And then he spins this highly personal, definitely controversial theory about Hamlet. He sees it not just as a play, but as this incredibly revealing window into Shakespeare's private life.
Focusing particularly on the unhappy relation with the dark lady of the sonnets.
Exactly. It's not detached academic stuff. It feels very much like Stephen projecting his own unresolved grief, his own perceived family betrayals onto Shakespeare. Art becoming a mirror for his personal torment.
It's a fascinating approach to criticism, isn't it? Almost biographical, but rooted in Stephen's own psychology.
He goes on to suggest that the theme of the false, or the usurping, or the adulterous brother, or all three in one, is to Shakespeare what the poor are not, always with him.
He connects it so vividly to that line from Hamlet, quote, "Poison poured in the porch of a sleeping ear," and the idea of a soul stricken mortally.
For Stephen, Shakespeare's life and work are just tangled together, infused with this pattern of betrayal, deep family conflict, which obviously resonates profoundly with his own feelings of being betrayed by friends and the loss of his mother.
And he doesn't hold back on controversial claims about Shakespeare's wife, Anne Hathaway, either.
No, he really doesn't. He paints this picture of her having a scandalous girlhood, calls her a buona roba, a bay where all men ride, which is a really unflattering term, basically implying promiscuity.
He suggests Shakespeare didn't even want to be buried with her. His four bones are not to be laid with hers. Reflects his own disgust, maybe, with perceived infidelity or betrayal.
And he uses these specific details to back it up. Her borrowing 40 shillings from her father's shepherd. The legal reference to 2 beds, a best and a second best, in Shakespeare's will.
It Feels like he's weaving this narrative that actually tells us more about Stephen's own anxieties about infidelity, abandonment, than it necessarily does about Shakespeare himself.
Absolutely. He's trying to reread Shakespeare through the agonizing lens of his own deep personal issues,
Mm.
almost constructing a parallel life for the bard that validates his own suffering.
And the other intellectuals in the room, like John Eglinton, Mr. Best, they offer more traditional interpretations.
Yeah, they bring up things like Coleridge calling Shakespeare the myriad-minded man, which is a real counterpoint to Stephen's very focused, almost obsessive, singular reading.
What's really interesting is how this abstract literary chat circles back to Bloom, who's also in the library, listening in. He finds Stephen's term, one-handled adulterer, for Shakespeare.
Which could mean a few things, maybe one-handed adulterous acts or just Shakespeare's alleged unfaithfulness.
Bloom finds it amusing. Tickles me, he thinks.
It's a small detail, but it shows Bloom's curious, sort of detached, yet relatable way of engaging with the intellectual world, finding humor in human flaws, even within grand literary theory.
Okay, so from the kind of heady atmosphere of the library, the narrative shifts again to something more collective, more somber.
The Dignam funeral, yeah. The procession details are quite specific, coach and 3 carriages, but it's described almost dismissively as a paltry funeral.
Indicating the family wasn't wealthy, highlighting social class in Dublin.
Exactly. And within this solemn context, the conversations among the mourners just reflect the diverse social fabric of Dublin. It's like a microcosm of the city's opinions, its prejudices.
Mr. Dedalus, Stephen's father, always sharp-tongued, has a harsh judgment for Mulligan. Calls him a contaminated, bloody, double-dyed ruffian.
Immediately reveals those deep, ingrained resentments and moral judgments floating around Dublin society.
There's also that discussion about suicide, prompted by the death of Reuben J's son.
Right. Martin Cunningham argues for a charitable view, while Mr. Dedalus, ever the pragmatist, maybe traditionalist, calls it cowardly.
And Bloom's reaction is interesting. He's about to speak, but then closed his lips again. Chooses silence.
Ah, classic Bloom. Observing rather than jumping into judgment. Processing internally instead of condemning out loud. It highlights his unique moral compass again, his role as this quiet outsider.
Inside the mortuary chapel, we get more of those vivid, unflinching observations.
The young boy with the wreath innocence amidst death, and the white-smocked priest, Father Coffey.
Described pretty unflatteringly as a muscular Christian with a belly on him like a poisoned pup.
Yeah, it's raw, almost grotesque description. Typical Joyce realism. Strips away any idealized view of the clergy.
And the use of Latin prayers is noted too, believed to make people feel more important.
Highlighting that subtle critique of religious formalism, the perceived theater of ceremony over maybe genuine spiritual connection.
And as the day moves on, shifting moods, shifting locations, we find ourselves moving into the pubs.
The vibrant, sometimes volatile pub dynamics of Dublin society. Specifically, Barney Kiernan's pub.
Which isn't just a place to drink, is it? It's like a central hub of Dublin life and a real hotbed of fervent nationalist sentiment.
Definitely. And the citizen is this central, almost larger-than-life figure there, representing that raw, aggressive strain of Irish nationalism.
He's depicted with a huge emerald muffler and shillelagh, almost a stereotype, an exaggerated embodiment of Irishness, bordering on caricature.
And the conversation quickly turns into this heated debate. Irish sports and shonen games.
Shonen being that derogatory term for Irish people seen as adopting English ways.
Exactly. And passionate calls for building up a nation once again. Reflects the fervent nationalist movements of the time, the deep divisions within Irish society.
And it's here that Bloom's Jewish identity becomes a direct target, doesn't it? Sharply and brutally.
Yeah. The citizen makes these deeply uncomfortable, venomous remarks about a queer odor coming off them for dogs, and explicitly calls Bloom a perverted Jew.
It's a stark, really uncomfortable moment of overt anti-Semitism.
And Bloom, ever the man of reason, tries to counter it with science. That can be explained by science. It's only a natural phenomenon.
That rational, almost clinical response just stands in such stark contrast to the citizens' fervent, often irrational nationalism and prejudice. It really highlights Bloom's isolation, his struggle against this deeply ingrained bigotry.
The whole pub scene is filled with these heated political arguments about figures like Joe Chamberlain, the British imperialist, about the Boers.
Referring to the Second Boer War, which Irish nationalists sympathized with.
Right, you hear shouts like, "Up the Boers!" And "We'll hang Joe Chamberlain on a sour apple tree." It perfectly illustrates that clash between Bloom's reasoned, somewhat detached approach and the citizens' intense, often aggressive nationalism.
It's a microcosm of the political and social tensions of early 20th century Ireland, where national identity, religion, political loyalty were just fiercely contested.
And this encounter leaves Bloom feeling, well, more alienated than ever.
Absolutely. And as the day wears on, the light starts to fade, casting these long shadows over Dublin. The focus naturally turns inward again, especially for Bloom.
We're drawn deeper into the labyrinth of his mind, where anxieties and fantasies, often triggered by things he sees or hears, start to blend and blur the lines of reality.
And this is where the world starts to feel truly uncanny, isn't it? Where the familiar gives way to the grotesque, the psychologically unsettling. For the labyrinth of the mind, fantasies, fears, and self-reflection. So evening sets in. Bloom's wanderings become more introspective, even fantastical. We see him buy that book, Sweets of Sin. He imagines Molly reading it, which hints at his maybe voyeuristic side, his complex feelings about her sexuality.
And it contrasts sharply with the book he buys for himself, Ruby, The Pride of the Ring, which sounds like more mundane, escapist pulp fiction, suggests this hidden world of desire and curiosity he keeps kind of separate.
He's still very much a creature of sensory experience, though, even when he's alone with his thoughts.
Definitely. We get that persistent, almost haunting smell of Up on X, Molly's perfume triggering all sorts of associations.
There's the distant rhythmic sound of bells, and that evocative forwarded wave speech of the sea. Sisu, HR, air, seas, ooze.
Pure linguistic impressionism. It draws him into this meditative state, connects him to the vast, indifferent natural world. These sensory details ground him, even as his mind starts drifting into the surreal.
And this is where the narrative really dives deep into Bloom's subconscious, isn't it? Blurring reality and fantasy, often with profoundly unsettling results.
Yes. This is where we fully encounter that literary sense of the uncanny or the grotesque, not like robots, but in how familiar realities get distorted and become deeply unsettling.
It's that psychological discomfort when something familiar becomes weirdly unfamiliar or disturbing.
Exactly. Like that earlier description of the laughing faces during Clive Kempthorpe's ragging. Pale faces. They hold their ribs with laughter. Oh, I shall expire. In Bloom's memory, it takes on this grotesque, unsettling quality. It reflects that valley of normacy where human behavior is pushed into disturbing, almost cruel extremes. It feels almost right, but fundamentally warped.
That's a great connection. And we see this psychological uncanny most vividly in that incredibly symbolic and frankly deeply unsettling sequence with Bello or Bella.
Ah, yes. The gender-swapping figure that just manifests from Bloom's subconscious desires and anxieties.
This figure completely dominates and humiliates Bloom in this disturbing hallucination.
He dreams he's forced into these subservient, degrading roles, addressing Bella as master, mistress, men-tamer, subjected to demeaning tasks like souse and bat our smelling underclothes and swab out our latrines.
It's a sequence that reveals so much, doesn't it? His deep-seated anxieties about gender roles, power dynamics in his marriage, maybe even suppressed desires for submission.
It's the familiar human interaction made strange, perverted, disturbing, pushing the boundaries of what is socially acceptable, psychologically comfortable.
And the scene is just loaded with sexual anxieties, taunts that strip Bloom bare.
Bella's accusations about Molly's past, describing her unskirted thighs and he-goat's udders, and about Bloom's perceived inadequacy. He shot us both, I can tell you. They're incredibly cutting, exposing his deepest insecurities about masculinity, his wife's fidelity.
There's even that visceral image of Boyle's voice, making him puke what he never ate. A strong physical reaction to psychological torment. Shows how deeply these anxieties affect him.
And Bella's accusation that Bloom is a sodomite with a crick in his neck, claiming her other 10 or 11 husbands suffocated in the one cesspool. It links right back to that one-handled adulterer idea and his deep insecurities. It culminates in this grotesque, self-flagellating fantasy.
These thematic distortions, they create such a strong sense of the grotesque, the unsettling, the psychologically disturbing.
It's a deep dive into the uncanny territory of Bloom's inner world. Familiar figures, familiar anxieties, all warped into these bizarre theatrical forms, often reflecting his fears, his self-perceived flaws, making his inner landscape far more vivid and chaotic than the external world he walks through.
And this internal torment continues, doesn't it, into that dreamlike judicial scene.
Where Bloom finds himself on trial, accused of being a well-known dynamitard, forger, bigamist, bawd, and cuckold, and a public nuisance.
It's not a real trial, obviously. It's this powerful manifestation of his public anxieties, his perceived shortcomings, his fears projected onto this grand, absurd, deeply humiliating stage. reflecting the societal judgments he feels subjected to as an outsider.
And his defense is just as surreal and pathetic. J.J.O. Malloy, his lawyer, defends him by arguing he's an infant, a poor foreign immigrant, a physical wreck from cobbler's wheat chest.
Even claims he's of Mongolian extraction and irresponsible for his actions. Not all there, in fact.
It's ludicrous and so demeaning. It strips Bloom of all agency, all dignity, and his appearance in this hallucination is equally pathetic. Barefoot, pigeon-breasted, in Lascar's vest and trousers, apologetic toes turned in.
A stark portrayal of his vulnerability, his self-effacement under the weight of social judgment, a truly uncanny vision of how he sees himself, maybe.
Yet, amidst all these anxieties and self-deprecating fantasies, Bloom also has moments where he envisions himself in grand political terms.
Right. He imagines himself as Lord Mayor of Dublin, proposing that practical, that visionary tram line from the cattle market to the river.
Advocating for reform of municipal morals and the plain Ten Commandments, new worlds for old, union of all Jew, Muslim, and Gentile. It shows his idealistic, progressive side, his genuine desire for social harmony, practical improvements, even if it's only happening in a hallucination right now. It's a hopeful counterpoint to his fears.
And this political fantasy gets met with both praise and condemnation, right? Mirroring the contradictions he faces in real life.
Exactly. Praised as the world's greatest reformer by some, while others yell, "Turncoat, up the Boers," and pro-Boer, reflecting those deep political divisions in Dublin.
And the mysterious man in the Macintosh shows up again.
Yeah, that recurring figure. A symbol of anonymous judgment, maybe even death. He jeers and accuses Bloom of being Leopold Bloom, the notorious fire raiser.
Perfectly captures the fickle nature of public opinion and the internal conflicts Bloom is wrestling with. His best intentions twisted into public accusations.
And finally, amidst these turbulent inner landscapes, Bloom drifts into these moments of profound philosophical reflection, pulling back from the personal to the universal.
He thinks about evolution increasingly vaster, contemplating the moon, the Milky Way, Sirius, distant constellations.
And he connects these huge celestial events to deeply personal human lives, noting a star appeared about the period of the birth of Stephen Dedalus and after the birth and death of Rudolph Bloom Jr.
That's incredible. That blend of the cosmic and the intensely personal, finding meaning, maybe solace, in the vastness of the universe, even while dealing with his profound personal loss, the death of his infant son, Rudy.
He even applies grand scientific principles to just mundane existence, thinking about the law of the conservation of energy while just standing still.
These moments show his intellectual curiosity, his desire to find order and meaning in everything, even amidst his private anxieties.
It's a testament to his resilient mind, always seeking patterns, connections, a kind of internal anchor in the swirling chaos of his thoughts.
Okay, so as the night deepens and these internal worlds are turning, the narrative skillfully shifts one last time, bringing Bloom and Stephen closer together.
Leading them towards this fragile common ground and the quiet, yet deeply symbolic, end to their long, intertwined day. 5. Night's end. Convergence, connection, and departure. So, as the night draws to a close, something rare and significant happens. Stephen, after his own long, winding path through Dublin, eventually joins Bloom at his home. He actually enters Bloom's kitchen, the domestic setting. We see those familiar grounding elements again. The range with the saucepan and kettle.
The handkerchiefs and hose, specifically one pair of ladies' gray hose clamped by 3 erect wooden pegs. Such a tangible, intimate detail, anchors the scene right back in the everyday reality of Bloom's home.
And the lemon-scented soap. That subtle but persistent motif through Bloom's whole day. It reappears, having been shifted around in his pockets.
It's like this small, tangible thread connecting all his disparate experiences. A symbol of cleansing, maybe, or something more personal.
And the atmosphere then just settles into this quiet, almost profound contemplation. The text says, silent, each contemplating the other in both mirrors of the reciprocal flesh of their his noth his fellow faces.
Wow. That's a powerful image. It captures their connection, their shared humanity. Despite all their differences and different experiences that day, they see themselves reflected in each other, recognizing a kindred spirit, maybe, a shared vulnerability, a deep, wordless understanding.
And despite the silence, despite their different backgrounds, there is this intellectual exchange that reveals deeper common ground, mutual respect.
Stephen writes Irish characters, Bloom writes Hebrew.
Yeah, and each explains their arithmetical values as ordinal and cardinal numbers that list 3, 1, 4, and 100. Their knowledge is noted as theoretical. They aren't fluent speakers, but it highlights this shared intellectual curiosity.
A fascination with language, symbols, a mutual appreciation for ancient traditions. It's a moment of quiet, unspoken recognition of each other's minds.
This scene really highlights their striking similarities and differences, doesn't it? It invites us, the listener, to really think about their parallel journeys.
Both are described as sensitive to artistic impressions, musical in preference to plastic or pictorial, suggests a shared aesthetic sense.
They also both preferred a continental to an insular manner of life, hinting at this cosmopolitan outlook that maybe sets them apart from the more inward-looking Dubliners they've encountered.
And importantly, both professed their disbelief in many orthodox beliefs, suggesting this shared, maybe unspoken intellectual skepticism, a questioning nature that binds them despite their separate paths.
The text subtly asks us, did Bloom discover common factors of similarity between their respective like and unlike reactions to experience? It invites us to consider how their parallel journeys through Dublin have, in some ways, mirrored each other, leading them to this fragile, momentary, but deeply significant connection.
Their parting is described with such formal, almost geometric precision.
Standing perpendicular at the same door and on different sides of its base, the lines of their valedictory arms, meeting at any point and forming any angle less than the sum of two right angles.
It's a beautiful, symbolic image of their lives, isn't it? Two parallel lines that just briefly intersect, touch, and then diverge again, each returning to their own separate existence, but maybe forever subtly changed by that meeting.
And the departure is marked by sound, the precise passage of time, the sound of the peal of the hour of the night by the chime of the bells in the Church of St. George.
A temporal anchor for the end of this long day signals the return to routine.
But the echoes of that sound, what each character hears, are distinctly different. It beautifully sums up their different internal worlds, how they process experience.
Stephen hears fragments from a funeral liturgy, Liliata rutilantium, terma succum det, ibulantium ne virginum, chorus excipiet.
Reflecting his continued preoccupation with death, grief, spiritual matters. His mind always drawn to the sacred, the somber.
And Bloom, in stark contrast, hears something much more mundane, yet maybe equally poignant.
Hi-ho, 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 hi-ho. It's simpler, more earthly, maybe a bit of a nursery rhyme, a simple folk tune. Reflects his practical, perhaps resigned acceptance of life's rhythms, his mind less burdened by overt spiritual worries, more tuned into the everyday.
And then that really poignant final detail about the coin.
Ah, yes, Bloom's florin with 3 notches on the billed edge. For circulation on the waters of civic finance, for possible, circuitous, or direct return.
He wonders, was the clown Bloom's son? No, implying Stephen wasn't the son figure he maybe hoped for.
And then, had Bloom's coin returned? Never. Highlighting this profound sense of loss, unrealized hope for Bloom, especially the loss of his son, Rudy, the hope for a male heir.
The unreturned coin symbolizes that perpetual longing, doesn't it? Adds this touch of quiet sorrow, unresolved grief to the end of his day. A poignant echo of that central theme of loss and longing that runs through his whole journey.
It's a perfect encapsulation of his journey, and really of the novel itself.
We've journeyed through just one incredibly complex day in Dublin, experienced the rich, often turbulent inner lives of both Stephen Dedalus and Leopold Bloom.
We've seen how literature, deep personal history, bustling public life, even those wild internal fantasies all intertwine, creating this vivid, multi-layered tapestry of human experience.
Joyce really does make the mundane epic, doesn't he? Revealing these vast, sometimes uncanny depths within just an ordinary day.
We really hope this exploration has given you maybe a shortcut or at least some insight into the nuances of these fascinating characters and the immersive world Joyce so meticulously created.
Perhaps you found your own aha moments in the seemingly mundane details or in the big philosophical questions that pop up from their internal monologues, their encounters with the unsettling, the grotesque.
Indeed. And as you go about your own day, maybe consider how our own daily routines, our own internal chatter, those seemingly disconnected encounters we all have.
How they might, if laid bare, reveal a similarly rich and complex dive into our own consciousness.
What uncanny connections might we find between our outward actions and our deepest inner worlds? Those hidden currents that shape our own narratives.
A provocative thought to ponder, for sure.
It is.
Thank you for joining us on the UNCAiNNY VAiLLEY Podcast.